Hello, it's Lance Osborne, and even though it's been a little while since my last video, I'm going to try and knock out 3 videos in 3 days. Why? Because a new super long documentary on the Beatles has just been released. Not all at once, but in 3 parts over 3 days. This is a big deal for any Beatles fan, and if you're watching this video, you probably know what I'm talking about. So anyway, this video will be my kind of hot take impressions of part 1, which was just released on November 25th, Thanksgiving Day here in the United States. I'll dig in here in a second, but a reminder to new fans who are wondering what the fuss is all about. This documentary is 100% focused on the Beatles recording sessions for the Let It Be film and album that took place in January of 1969. The backstory on these sessions is a long and winding story, as is the story of this documentary's creation. It was first announced with sparse details nearly 3 years ago. I've covered a whole lot of this information as it came out here on this channel, so check that out if you want to dig in real deep. But now, part 1 of the series has finally been released, and it's exclusively on streaming service Disney+. Beatles fans across the globe finally get to see what director Peter Jackson and the Beatles company Apple Corps have hyped up for the last 1,000 plus days. And part 1 is no teaser episode. It alone clocks in at 2 hours and 36 minutes. All right, let's jump in. And consider this your fair warning if you don't want any spoilers. Spoilers, by the way, is that the right term for 50-year-old material, stories, and audio that's been generally available for those who seek it? Anyway, let's start with the intro. It's a 10-minute montage that is, to me, reminiscent of how Anthology begins. My take on the intro is that it's a bit of a necessary evil. The Get Back documentary can't just jump in on the first day of the sessions. But I felt like it was more of a social background on the band and not enough focused on the music. Yeah, Beatlemania, with its wigs and the boots and the games and all that stuff, it took the world by storm. But why? The music. It should always come back to the music. Yet this docuseries lasts over 7 hours, way longer than the theatrical cut we were initially told about. So I have to trust that this project will give us plenty of music to enjoy. Then, as part 1 really got going, the filmmakers take us into Twickenham, similar to how the Let It Be film begins. And like Let It Be, there is no narration. The band and those that surround them mostly give us the story with their dialogue. But along the way, some visuals share context and names. I think this works exceptionally well throughout the project. Anthology worked with narration because it was the 4 members of the group telling the story in their own words. But first of all, that's been done. Moreover, another Beatle has passed away since the mid-90s project. So that would leave just too much on Ringo and Paul to narrate. I suppose another narrative option would be for pundits or historians to weigh in, but we get enough of that on YouTube. Now, I'm not going to get into a minute-by-minute breakdown of part 1. Please, just watch it for yourself and enjoy it. But I'll continue here with some highlights and some big-picture technical points. The first highlight for me, these guys are funny. We know this in many ways, early press conferences, films like A Hard Day's Night, studio chatter, but we don't often link their humor to the Get Back sessions, do we? Yeah, it was cold and dark in Twickenham, but I was literally laughing out loud at some of the bits. Some of it's in the editing, like the bit about Mal Evans being told to find a hammer and anvil.
Mal, we should get a hammer and an anvil. See you later.
But most of it is just the guys being themselves.
Flowing out like glycerine into a paper cup. They slither wildly as they slip away across the universe.
And another highlight are the flashbacks, for lack of a better term. I enjoyed the throwback photos when the band played One After 909, but the sequence around rock and roll music was especially poignant. The filmmakers took the creative liberty of adding crowd noise to the band's 1969 Twickenham take, spliced with visuals from the band playing the song on tour in Japan in 1966. This worked so well, in my opinion, reminding us of just how far the band had come since this performance just 2.5 years prior. The last highlight I'll mention is the final scene of part 1, the John, Paul, Ringo, and Yoko jam after George leaves the band. Now, I know some of y'all will disagree, but that's cool. You can be wrong. And I know it's weird to call this a highlight. It was simultaneously disheartening and obnoxious. But the editing style really helped paint the picture of the chaos the band was experiencing with George Harrison's departure. Fans who have the bootlegs have heard this scene before, but the visuals now presented in Get Back are striking. Now for some technical bits that I noticed along the way. So we have to start here with the facts. The filmmakers were working with 150 hours of audio and had to marry this with about 60 hours of video from these sessions. Obviously, that means at times there's an important story told with audio that isn't fully captured on film. And sometimes the raw audio that's been bootlegged for years has been edited to fit the story. Fair and not unethical, but it is sometimes kind of jarring. And maybe it's just me, but I think there may be some lip sync issues with the video as well.
I mean, we've been very negative since Mr. Epstein passed away. And that's why all of us in turn has been sick of the group. It's discipline we lack.
Anyway, sometimes camera shots don't exactly line up with that moment's conversation, or the editing is done so quickly so as to not show a mouth whose voice you're hearing. This is kind of hard to explain, but easier to see. Comment below if you see it too.
Which could be like nightclub acting, just the smoochy low lights and about 10 people.
Related, at times I think I see where Peter Jackson's digital expertise comes in handy. This was most notably used on They Shall Not Grow Old. Now, in the interest of not ruining it for anyone else, I'll keep most of this visual effects work that I'm seeing to myself. But for a milder example, there are shots that, to my eyes, are cropped beyond what would normally be reasonable, and I see some soft spots or digital artifacts as a result. I'll leave it up to you to decide if this editing style and VFX work was worth it or not. But keep in mind, even before the intro montage, part 1, the entire series, begins with a notice that hard editorial decisions had to be made. I think all this was done tastefully and respectfully, finding the balance between use of digital tricks and storytelling. Aside from the technical notes, I'd really like to weigh in on where I think the narrative is going here and Get Back. We know the facts, of course, but this project clearly is using foreshadowing and other key elements of good storytelling. But it's still a little early for that. Part 2 should clear things up, and I'll comment then. That said, I'd love to hear what you thought about part 1. Highlights, lowlights, and everything in between. Feel free to jump into the conversation down in the comments. And check back here tomorrow for a follow-up video if you want to discuss part 2 with me. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe here to the Fab4 Archivist channel and hit the notification bell. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. I'm going to go watch part 2.